Welcome to NovoEdTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEdTalks podcast, a podcast for training trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEdTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Heather Balcerek, who is the Senior Manager of Corporate Learning and Development at Maximus. Heather is a certified professional in training management with more than 15 years of experience launching, leading, and facilitating successful employee development programs across multiple industries with Amazon, Apple, and Verizon. Currently, she is a senior manager of corporate learning and development at Maximus. Her programs focus on the development for senior leaders, director level, and above. Heather specializes in building programs from the ground up and reviving programs that lost their way. She's also host of the leadership development podcast, Connect the Dots, Lead the Way. We will be very excited to check that out. Thank you, Heather. And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit further and tell us about your role, your company, and your background?
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and be with you, Melissa, and to meet everybody. Hi, virtually. Uh, so, you read my bio. That's pretty much it. I have been in L&D for almost 20 years, which is crazy to think about. And I got my start in kind of like the retail customer service and sales space. That's where I started my journey in doing training and helping people learn how to sell and learn the systems. And then about halfway through my career, I migrated to the call center, contact center space. Stayed in kind of like that tech support area when I moved to Shurion. And then when I went to Apple, working with the tech support, Apple Care advisors, working with them. So I kind of stayed in this tech support world until I went to Amazon. And there, I was able to support a very large HR organization. And so a lot of talent acquisition and HR talent management type things. And then after that, coming to Maximus now, kind of back in that contact center space, because Maximus is if you don't know what Maximus is, which most people don't, and that's okay, we are a government contractor. We focus on health and human services. So anything that helps people get the support they need. That is what Maximus does. We do that on a federal and state level. We also have global locations. And so coming into Maximus, I support our corporate L&D, which basically means like the corporate office. However, all of that kind of goes down into the business. So I feel like while my focus is director level and above, I get to go on site sometimes and I can get to connect with like the supervisors on site, the call center representatives that are taking the phone calls and working with our customers. And so I enjoy kind of working with all of that at Maximus and just helping anybody lead because I think anybody can lead from where they are. Other than that, I live in Clearwater, Florida. I have been here for about 4 years and love it. Moved here for the beach, so that's so there's a little bit about me.
Love that. I can relate. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. So also moved from New England down to the warmer weather, although it is quite warm this summer.
Yes. Yes, it is warm everywhere right now.
Well, thank you so much for expanding upon that, Heather. Why don't you talk a little bit about your learners and some of their biggest challenges?
So the learners that I support, so focusing on that director level and above, these are individuals who are very busy. And that is one of their biggest challenges is finding the time to actually put development, into their schedule. With one of the programs, which I'm sure I'll talk about here shortly, with the executive development program that I run, that was definitely something that we saw a lot of people saying, "Oh, I can't because I have this meeting that just came up, or I have this going on, I have this work trip," and there are just so many things that are on their plate that they struggle to get development time in for themselves. And so they're looking for ways, how can I do it on the go? And what can I do? How can I do this in quick, kind of small bites? Um, and so I think it's that challenge of finding the time, but then it's also being able to actually put it into practice and connect with other people, to make it actionable. Because you can learn all day long, but if you don't ever get to put it into action, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And how are you approaching some of those challenges? Whether you want to talk to both of those big ones, another one, or just one of them.
Oh gosh. If I could solve the problem of time,
Yeah, right.
I would be a gazillionaire. Um,
Sure.
but that's a problem that the way that we're tackling it, at least for our next cohort of our executive development program, is kind of in some of the changes that we've made. We've already planned out all of the dates for the next year. So when we get the people into the program, we're going to be able to send them calendar invites in August that go from October to September of 25. So October 24 to September 25. Everything's going to go ahead and be on the calendar. So we're trying to plan out as best we can. Things happen, but if it's on the calendar, hey, you can try to work around it the best. The
Yeah,
other things,
absolutely.
the other things that we're doing though, like adjustments that we've made, are the amount of, like, our in the last program, we had a lot of self-guided learning that they were going to do, and nobody got it done. We had a couple people got it done. Most of them did not, and most of them said, I don't have time to do this." And so we had to step back and go, okay, how can we make it beneficial? And so we were transitioning to where they're only going to do, I think I have 4 self-guided learnings total over a year. And they're going to do them, they're all the same. Like, everybody's going to do the same one at the same time. And there's a discussion board element. So they get the asynchronous learning of and the self-guided learning part, but they're also able to talk with the other people who are taking it at the same time via a discussion board. So they get to kind of put the two things together. And then it's very, like, the first one we're doing, it's a 57-minute like learning path. It's divided into 10 videos. So it's very bite size. It's over 8 weeks, right? Let me watch this one video. Let me, like, it's making it so they can fit it into their schedule is kind of what we're doing on that piece.
I love that. And I love the meetings planned out for a year. I'm such a planner that totally vibes with me, but I think that's good too, because if it's on their in their calendars, they're probably forgetting about it, but then when they see it in their calendar, that gives them the opportunity to work around it. And sometimes it's like very simple solutions like that it really is just like getting very, very proactive with organization and structure and things like that. So I love that you all do that. With the rise of remote work and virtual collaboration, how has your approach to learning and development kind of adapted?
This is such a weird question for me because I have been remote for almost 10 years.
Yeah, wow.
So this is my world.
Yeah.
When COVID happened and all of that shift, I worked from home. I was working at Apple at the time. Nothing changed for us. No, I mean, it was just the same. It was everybody was already remote. We just kept doing what we do.
Yeah.
And so I think what for me now, um, obviously I'm still remote, because that's the way to be. No shoes, is my goal. So
Fits right in with the beach life. I love that.
yes. Um, but I think with approaching it with remote work, it's figuring out how to be connected to the learner. And there's a couple different things that like I try to do with my programs to do this. Um, One of those is if nobody's ever heard of him, his name's Chad Littlefield. It's wean.me is his website. He is a phenomenal facilitator, and he introduces this concept of connection before content and the importance of not your typical icebreaker. Let's not do a this or that. Like if you're going to do that, how does that tie back to the message you're about to teach them? How does that go into the content so people can start to really like it's a useful time. And so he has a bunch of different approaches. And so that's something that I've taken. I took that into my executive development program and did that every time we got together, intentional connection for like 30 minutes. Usually it was a 30-minute segment at the beginning of our time together to really connect so they could get to know each other and it would flow into whatever our subject was for that day or that session. So you can do this in smaller bites with, shorter classes. Obviously, you're not going to spend 30 minutes of a 2-hour training doing that. That's, not helpful. So maybe it's a 10-minute connection at the beginning where when people come in, you've got a question that's going and people are just answering it in chat. And it's a thought-provoking question to get them thinking about that subject that you're about to talk about. And so I think that's a big piece is the connection. Um, I think the other parts of it have to do with just being real and authentic. Um, because this is technology, things happen, slides are not going to go forward. Like you just have to own it. If something happens, you just have to, you can't let it fluster you. And I think before everybody was in remote work, like it was just, you know, probably people were, got a little bit more self-conscious about it. Well, now guess what? Look, we're all here. A cat comes through the door, a kid comes through the door,
Yeah.
your slides work. Something's going to happen and it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And I think that approaching it in that it doesn't have to be perfect,
Yeah.
that life happens and it's real, I think also helps people be engaged with what you're teaching and what they're doing. Cat coming through the door
I know. I
absolutely
was like that.
just
I was
happened.
just gonna say that couldn't be
Wow.
more on cue. Good job, Kat.
Good job.
So, how does your team identify and address skills gaps within the organization or within the programs that you're running?
So I'll talk specifically about the programs that I'm running because that's the easiest thing to explain because it's a whole other thing that we're trying to do moving to a skills-based organization. So let me talk about the um, executive development program and how we identified those skills gaps. So the individuals were nominated for the program by their leaders. But once they were accepted the invitation to the program, then they filled out like an intake survey for us and they picked what competencies. We have leadership competencies at Maximus. They picked which one they wanted to focus on. And from there, that's how we built their curriculums and started to work towards like what we wanted to focus on. So in our first cohort, the thing that was picked the most was drive strategy and innovation. And innovation is a huge topic at every company, I'm sure, but definitely for us, it's a huge topic. And so that information has then kind of helped identify, okay, obviously people know we need to fix this, we need to do something about it, help people understand how to be innovative, not and how to break down silos, because that's a big piece that we're also working on. And so we've brought that information into this next cohort. So those self-guided learnings I talked about, they are all strategy focused, strategy and innovation focused. So we've identified, okay, we know that this is a problem. How do we solve for it? And so we're finding the ways to offer specific things to that group because these are our future leaders.
Yeah.
These are VPs, senior VPs that are, getting ready to go into that C-suite. Um, and we need them to know how to be strategic, how to be innovative, and how do they roll that down to their teams.
I love that. And I love the specificity of it and doing that. Like I think sometimes people look at skills gaps as such a like broad, like a very high level broad thing. And they don't get very specific with it and therefore find it like kind of harder to tackle that problem.
Uh,
How do you currently measure the effectiveness of these programs? And do you have core KPIs that you measure?
this question is
Yeah.
um so at Tice a couple of weeks ago, I did a talk called Measuring the Unmeasurable, which was about leadership development programs and was about the executive development program. And so coming in, this was a program that I had been in development for a little over a year when I started. They'd lost their program manager. So I came in, picked it up, and kind of what's here? What are we looking at? So I wasn't in those initial conversations of like, to figure out like what are the expectations so that I could write down a return on expectations. Like, what do you expect? So I can report back to you. And so I really had to just kind of pull from everywhere. But what I did is I took our competencies and what's important, where do we want to be. I took our business goals, we have some strategic pillars as well. I helped those kind of guide me as far as, okay, what is the action that represents this? How can I look at it? It's not always going to be a number because yes, I have NPS scores and I have participant data and all of those fun little numbers that look good on a slide. Um, but it's the I always get these backwards. Qualitative. That's the one I want. That's the words. Um, in my head, I always get them backwards. Um, that data is how you measure that piece is listening. You have to have conversations with your participants or with your audience, and you have to really listen and step back. One of the biggest pieces for us was looking at the impact that things that happened in the program had on things outside of the program. So specifically, one of the examples was um, our individual development plan process. So we went through that with every participant, and we realized, wow, okay, we could probably make this a little better. And so we raised our hands, can we do this? Boss was like, yes, go forth and conquer. And we were able to really completely revamp our process to now where when people fill out an individual development plan, we have an e-learning that teaches them how to do it. They get a workbook in a Word document automatically afterwards that they can type in and fill out their progress. They get reminder emails throughout the course of their goal period. And so that's an impact from the executive development program. It wasn't expected. It wasn't on my list of measures. Um, but I was listening. We were paying attention, and we were able to use that to impact another part of the business.
Yeah, that's great. I love that piece too about like the listening piece where it's, like you said, you can have KPIs and numbers and stuff, and you can measure things with whatever metrics that you want to measure it with, but you also have to have that kind of like manual component to it. You may have kind of shared the case study that you may have wanted to share, but do you want to expand upon that or share another example of a successful case study of an L&D initiative that you've done?
Um, yeah, let me expand on it. Because it was definitely wow, like just from the time it started, because I started at Maximus at the end of April of 2023. And my first goal was you need to launch this program by the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of September. At first I didn't know that it was the fiscal year. I thought it was just the end of the year, like December. I was like, oh yeah, we got this. And it was like September. I was like, oh, that. Okay. Okay, let's do this. So picking that up and launching it, I launched it in September. So we met our deadline, but going through and trying to figure out the different components. So there were kind of three different components. We had individual components. So they had their individual development plan where they set a goal that they would focus on for this 8-month program. From that goal, they identified their self-guided learning that they wanted to do, and we built that into a curriculum for them in our LMS system. And then we had the option to do mentoring at the end if they wanted to, as a mentee or a mentor. And then as a group, when our group was ended with 23 people, so it started with 25, and um, everybody got an executive coach. So we paid for them to have a coach for unlimited sessions for 6 months. And then we had 2 in-person sessions where we did group training. So the first one we did situational leadership 2, and then we did insights discovery, which is similar to like a Neurocolor, a Myers-Briggs, like that. We did that with our C-suite. So they came in and talked about their color preferences, and the group talked about theirs. So they were able to kind of figure out how to communicate with each other, which was really great. And then in the second one, we did a business acumen class, and then they did some final presentations. They did cohort meetings, so we split them into groups of 5. And they had a cohort meeting every month for 1 hour. And in that, they did an exercise where they answered, it was called the 6-question exercise. I absolutely, completely will admit that I stole it and used it as my own from a wonderful lady at Tice in last year. Thank you to her. But it's like 6 really broad questions that make them really think and brainstorm and just off the cuff. And they only get so much time to answer it. And then that's it. And so we had all of them do this over the course of 3 months, and then we split the questions out. They had to take that information and then figure out, what is the big pain point? What do we want to focus on? How are you going to solve that problem? And that's what they presented at the last in-person session. So, and then we had, so yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, I think that, and then we checked in with them multiple times throughout the process just to see how are they doing, like how's things going, and anything that they needed help with, like we would help them find if they needed resources for their team or something like that, we would help them. Any questions thus far before I get to the end?
No, this is great. I love how thorough you're being with this. So please continue.
So at the end, our executive team, I am incredibly, incredibly grateful for. The last day of the final presentations, we invited all the executive team to be there virtually, in person, didn't matter. And I will say all of them came in at some point in time that day. Several of them stayed for the whole time. But our CEO came in for the first 2 presentations. And the conversations that happened between our CEO and our participants opened so many eyes for our executive team. Like it wasn't even intended to be like this, sounding board or any, it was just the participants were talking about real problems. They were talking about, one of the teams gave an example of a program manager and all of the things that had been implemented in the past year that she's having to go through, that she's having to lead her team through, plus just normal day jobs, and how much is on their plate. And it's not that our executives don't know this, they do, but sometimes seeing it in that way, it's like, oh gosh, wait a minute. Like, let's, we got to figure this out. We got to do something different. And so that's something that happened just very organically. Again, going back to the measures, didn't expect that. Was not on the list of things to measure, but
Oh,
it happened. And our executives um, truly asked great questions. They gave great feedback. Were engaged the whole time. And then the following week, we had an HR summit, and the program was talked about numerous times that next week. The CEO mentioned it in our fireside chat that we had. So all of the effort that the participants put in, even though they were overworked, they didn't have time to do everything, they still made such an impact. And now everybody's so excited. We're starting nominations for the second cohort this week. So we're already getting ready to get into the next cycle and just can't wait for everything that's to come with the new piece because we're expanding it to a year instead of 8 months. It's going to a year, and it's going to include um, a piece that we didn't get to do this past year, a piece that I missed. It was in the plan, didn't happen, which was action learning or um, something they could do to put it into practice. And we
yep.
just honestly, we ran out of time.
Yeah.
It just how to do it. We couldn't figure out the right way to do it. So this time we're taking that kind of those extra 4 months, and that's what it's going to be is how are we taking everything we've learned in these first 8 months and putting it into practice? How are you going to teach it back? What are they going to do? So that's, something that's to me, all of that feedback for better, for worse, has made this next one it's going to be even better.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. What a great example. Thank you so much for sharing all the detail on that. And just like what amazing results to have so many kind of wins on that and the unforeseen wins with like the executive team getting that kind of feedback. But also like, like you mentioned, their willingness to participate and like be involved in that and get that kind of feedback and take that and kind of reflect on their jobs as well and what they're doing and what they're putting on everyone's plate. So that's awesome. What a great case study. Excuse me. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Um,
Um, what role does technology play in your L&D programs? And do you have specific like tools and platforms that you leverage that you found to be incredibly successful or helpful?
oh, technology is probably the hardest part. Uh, Technology can play a huge role. The part that it plays for my programs, we use Microsoft Teams. That is our platform, and for the executive development program, like we had a channel um, where we would put stuff. Their cohorts had channels. That kind of we did have some global participants, which um, our global systems aren't completely connected. So there was a little bit of disconnect when it came to like collaboration. And so like trying to find that. So it plays a huge role, especially when it doesn't work the way you need it to. You find those breaking points very quickly. Um, so knowing that though from the first one and going into this next one, taking the discussion board piece for the self-guided learnings, that's not built in. It's not built into our teams. It's not built into our LMS. It's actually through the provider that we're partnering with. So it happens on their site. So we don't have to, so it's available for everybody. There's not going to be any breakdown of, oh, I have to log into two different systems to see. No, it's just there, and it's for them. And we're looking at other ways for collaboration to happen outside of just a Word document or PowerPoint presentation. So trying to be inventive with things like Mural or Miro or whatever whiteboard tool that you want
Yep.
to, pick. Trying to utilize things like that make that collaboration easier within the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Kind of thinking about just the space in general, the L&D space in general, What are some of the key takeaways you've seen over the past 5 years? And kind of a two-part question here, but they usually kind of go hand in hand. What are you seeing in L&D coming up in the future that you think is really going to change things?
So I think in the past 5 years or so, kind of the things that I've seen is people overthinking,
Yeah.
people overthinking it.
Yeah.
Um, they're trying too hard to be everything, and you can't. It wears people out. Um, Going back to the very beginning, when we talked about icebreakers. Icebreakers wear people out. I'm just gonna be honest. Let's just stop. Make them intentional. That's okay. If they're intentional, they're fine. But I don't want to pick potato for no reason. Um, so so
That's such a good one, and I feel like it's such a human one that everyone can relate to it because everyone at some point has been involved in an icebreaker that they're like, "What are we talking about right now? How is this my life?" So I love
yes.
that.
So I think the takeaways is to, don't overthink it, but be intentional. That's definitely for me, that's something I've taken away the past 2 years.
Yeah,
Um, and really knowing your audience and learning more about them and being open to their feedback. And I think moving into the future of L&D, obviously we could talk AI. I wouldn't talk well about it because it's still very much something I am learning. That's going to play a huge part. But I think it's when we take that kind of being intentional, right? Not overthinking it, we got to take that into something like AI. You have to
yeah,
be intentional with it. You can't just throw something in there and, yep, that's the first thing I'm going to use that. No, it's your brainstorm, it's your sounding board, it's your I can't think of anything right now, help me start tool.
yeah,
And then be intentional with the prompts and be intentional with what you're looking for out of it. And then that's going to help you do whatever you're doing. So, I mean, that's the future of L&D, I think is going to obviously include a lot of AI
Mhm.
assistance, a lot of automation of things. But I think the future of L&D is also more human centered
Mhm.
because now if AI is taking these automated things, I can use less brain power just thinking things up. Where's my starting point? I'm able to then take that extra time, that extra focus to focus on the learner. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the future, right? Automation with AI leading to more of a human focus and being able to really focus on the person.
Yeah, you're actually the second person to bring up that concept, which I find has really got my mind kind of like, just like kind of marinating on that. But where it's that, yes, there's these like AI is going to rapidly evolve and like make things like exponentially faster and more efficient in a lot of different ways. I truly believe that. Um, but I think that scares a lot of people, but I think to your point and kind of like this positive, hopeful spin on it that I've heard a couple people say now is that it's also going to give us back that time to kind of get back to more person to person, which is really a beautiful thing if you think of it, and not necessarily the first thought that people are having when they talk about AI or advancements in technology. So I think that's a really, really beautiful thing. I'm very excited to ask you this last question, given your role and who you work with. But what advice would you give to those just stepping into a leadership role?
Oh, if you're stepping into a leadership role, the the best piece of advice I can give is to listen, like just genuinely listen. Um, that's something that I feel like I've said now for several years, because I feel like it's one of my superpowers is to listen and to really I have a genuine want to understand what my team is going through, what my peers are going through, and make a connection with them. And if you're a leader, everybody's built differently, But as a leader, you need to be invested in the people that you're leading and show that in the way that you can show that. And listening is one way that everybody can show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so simple, so important, and so not done well by some leaders.
It's
That's
so
for
hard sometimes because
yeah,
we have,
yeah,
as a leader, you have so many things just running through your head. You're like, oh, let's talk. I got it. I got all these. Like, okay, stop.
yeah,
How are you today? How are
yeah,
things going? How's the family? Like acknowledging the person outside of work. Who are they outside of work and listening and knowing them. And then that leads you to be able to ask those questions, have those harder conversations even when you have to, because you're connected, and that person knows you care. And so when you have to have a hard conversation, it's not like, well, they just don't care about me. No, no, they care about me enough to give me the tough feedback so that I do better.
yeah.
That's what you're going for. So,
Well, and also like from a leadership perspective, it's like, do you really like if you have this big important initiative that you need someone to head up and they're having like the worst day of their lives,
yeah,
do you want to
maybe
tell them
don't tell them.
yeah, like do you want to give them that project that day in that moment? Like maybe not, So I think that, again, very simple, but very, very important and often something that we kind of skip over or just don't do. So Heather, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I really, really appreciate you sharing kind of all the details and nuances of some of the programs that you've done. I think that's very, very helpful for our listeners. So thank you so much for joining us on NovoEd Talks.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Melissa.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in once again to NovoEd Talks.